He clutched at his throat, gasped, his vision blurred. The room spun, a dizzying carousel of blurred edges and fading colors. Panic swelled, a primal fear he couldn't place. His thoughts, once sharp and controlled, dissolved into a hazy fog. What did you do?" he stammered, but the words emerged as a slurred whisper. His tongue felt thick, useless. He tried to rise to confront the figure silhouetted against the dim light, but his limbs, once sturdy and reliable, betrayed him. They trembled. Too weak to support his weight, he crumpled back onto the plush carpet, a sense of utter helplessness washing over him. His last coherent thought before the darkness claimed him was a name laced with bitterness, now tinged with a chilling terror he couldn't comprehend. His eyes fluttered shut. The world contracted, shrinking to the suffocating confines of his own unraveling mind. Elena watched, her expression unreadable as he succumbed to the cocktail coursing through his veins. His struggle, his fear, it was all a symphony of vindication to her ears. For years she had endured his manipulations, his callous disregard for her emotions, her very being. He had underestimated her, dismissed her as weak, a mistake she intended to rectify in the most permanent of ways. His arrogance had been his shield, his power a weapon he wielded without mercy. He moved through the world accustomed to taking what he desired, leaving a trail of shattered lives in his wake. Elena had been merely another conquest, another trophy to be discarded when he tired of the game. But Elena was no longer the naive girl he once knew. She had learned from the master manipulator himself, and she would use that knowledge to dismantle him piece by piece. The changes were gradual at first, subtle shifts in his demeanor that could be mistaken for fatigue or stress. His razor-sharp focus dulled, his once impeccable memory began to falter. He, who thrived on control, found himself struggling to recall simple words, to follow the thread of a conversation. His reflection in the mirror became a stranger. The lines on his face, once marks of distinction, deepened, etched with a vulnerability he couldn't conceal. His once commanding presence shrank, his shoulders slumping with an unfamiliar frailty. He raged against the transformation, his frustration mounting with each passing day, but his anger lacked its usual potency. It flared and faded with alarming speed, replaced by a bewildering confusion, a childlike fear he couldn't explain. Elena had always been drawn to the intricacies of life, to the delicate dance of genes that shaped every living organism. It was this fascination that led her to the burgeoning field of genetic engineering. She immersed herself in its possibilities, dedicating her life to unraveling the secrets held within the very building blocks of existence. Her relationship with him had started as a meeting of minds, a shared intellectual curiosity that quickly blossomed into something more. He, a titan in the world of finance, had been drawn to her brilliance, her quiet strength. But his charm had been a facade, a carefully constructed mask to conceal his true nature. He had used her research, her groundbreaking work on gene therapy, to further his own ambitions, to amass more wealth and power. He had betrayed her trust, stolen her life's work, and discarded her without a second thought. It was then, amidst the ashes of her shattered dreams, that the seed of revenge took root. The regression was relentless. His vocabulary dwindled, complex sentences replaced by a smattering of basic words, often mispronounced. His gait faltered, his steps becoming unsteady, hesitant. He stumbled often, his once assured stride reduced to a clumsy toddle. The man who had once controlled boardrooms with a single glance now struggled to hold a spoon. Food smeared across his face, a comical mask of frustration and confusion. He whined and fussed, his frustration erupting in bursts of incoherent babble and clumsy gestures. Sleep offered no escape. His nights were plagued by nightmares he couldn't articulate, waking in a cold sweat, his cries echoing with a primal terror that chilled Elena to the bone. He was lost in a world he no longer recognized, his adult mind shrinking with each passing day, leaving behind a void that echoed with the remnants of his former self. Elena had converted a spare room in her secluded country house into a nursery. It was ironic, she thought, how easily his world of power and influence had been reduced to the confines of these four walls. Here, surrounded by soft toys and pastel colors, he was no longer a threat. He was entirely reliant on her. She had documented every stage of his regression, her scientific curiosity battling with a growing sense of unease. His once sharp mind, the mind that had plotted and schemed, was now a blank slate, open and vulnerable. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now held a childlike innocence that both fascinated and disturbed her. He was clay in her hands, his fate entirely at her mercy. She could choose to halt the regression, to leave him trapped in this perpetual state of childhood. or she could allow the transformation to run its course, to witness the complete annihilation of the man who had wronged her so profoundly.